You do. Here is what you sound like if you have absolutely no integrity. Pay attention.
In the end, there always proves to be some truth.
There proves to be some truth in it.
I'll have a tenner with you that within the next month or so we find some evidence of it.
There you go. We will find some evidence of it. That's the bet. We'll find evidence.
But you do think
now,
some cats and dogs
fast forward, 12 months later.
If you can prove it, I've got my £10 ready.
Well, if you can prove it hasn't happened.
But that wasn't the bet, Nigel. The bet was...
Here it is, the moment James O'Brien finally says what so many have been thinking. No dodging, no sugarcoating. He calls Nigel Farage exactly what his record shows, a liar and a racist. And then he takes it apart, piece by piece. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. O'Brien doesn't rely on theatrics. He cuts through the pub banter persona and exposes the pattern. Bold claims to stir fear, then the retreat, then the spin, and on to the next scare story. That isn't debate, it's misdirection. And here's why it matters. When politicians trade in fear, it doesn't just energize their base, it poisons public life. Neighbors become suspects, headlines become weapons, and the truth gets buried under endless panic. O'Brien refuses to play along. He calls it what it is, explains how it works, and holds the line. Watch closely, because this isn't just another exchange. It's a rare moment where the mask slips and the truth is laid bare.
Have a little listen to this. Taxi driver once told me that Nigel Farage is a racist liar.
Whenever he says something like this that sounds absolutely crackers, in the end, there always proves to be some truth in it.
You think Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs?
I'll have a tenner with you that within the next month or so we find some evidence of it.
It's 12 months. The idea that Haitians are eating cats and dogs in Springfield. If you can prove it, I've got my £10 ready.
Well, if you can prove it hasn't happened, the other way around.
Are you prepared now to say that that one was utterly nonsensical?
If I said to you that swans were being eaten in royal parks in this country, that carp were being taken out of ponds and eaten in this country by people who come from cultures that have a different... Would you agree it's happening here?
I've certainly read... I didn't know about swans. I've read about carp in fish.
Well, there you go. So, look... You know, neither of us can prove or disprove.
Who are taking the carp and the swans?
People who come from countries where that's quite acceptable.
Well, I've read headlines that it's Eastern Europeans, Romanians and people like that.
So I believe.
Is that what you've heard?
So I believe.
So it's a similar sort of story. They're eating
similar story.
They're eating our carp, they're eating our swans.
But, you know, I'm not saying that. I'm just putting it back as an argument.
It's a story that goes back to, perhaps inevitably, the Sun newspaper from about 20 years ago. And it was lies then, and it's lies now. But have a little listen to the beginning of this, because this is how liars operate. You make a bet that proof will be provided of something within a month, that Haitians are eating... So this is racism. You're supposed now to think that foreigners are going to eat your pets. Haitians are eating cats, Haitians are eating dogs. So, you know, it's all jolly backslapping fun, trebles all round. Let's have a bet about it. Let's not wonder what it's like to actually be one of the people who is being lied about, either directly or by association. Eastern Europeans all eating swans. It's a lie. If it was provable, if it was true, you would never stop hearing about it, but the truth doesn't matter to these people. Here is what you do. Here is what you sound like if you have absolutely no integrity. Pay attention.
In the end, there always proves to be some truth.
There proves to be some truth.
I'll have a tenner with you that within the next month or so we find some evidence of it.
There you go. We will find some evidence of it. That's the bet. We'll find evidence.
But you do think
now,
some cats and dogs
fast forward, 12 months later.
If you can prove it, I've got my £10 ready.
Well, if you can prove it hasn't happened.
But that wasn't the bet, Nigel. The bet was that within a month evidence would emerge. And it hasn't. So what do? You swivel, you slime, you squirm. And now you're telling lies about this country. You're telling lies about our neighbours, our friends, our Eastern European colleagues.
Well, there you go.
Who do not eat swans. Why does it feel so controversial to describe a racist lie as a racist lie? It's actually become more controversial in this country. It's become a bigger problem to accuse a racist of racism than it has to actually be a victim of it. And the whole two-tier nonsense is a big, big part of that. Dan's in Dover. Dan, what would you like to say?
I really like the idea of trying to simplify this. I think we're giving the Farages and the Trumps just far too much credit. The way I see it, there was a dam growing up for me, where on the other side of the dam was all the racism and the horrible stuff. And that was the underbelly, as it were. And for me, the dam has cracked, and I think it's we've been the proverbial boy sticking our finger in it sort of to try and stop it over the last sort of 20 years. But Farage and Trump are the crack. They've let it through. So I don't know. It's always been there. And again, I should have caveated. I'm coming at this as a 44-year-old white male, so I'm coming at this with pure privilege. But
it's not only been there. There's also Tinder, isn't there? I don't mean the dating site. There's also people who can be persuaded. And that's what this rhetoric is designed to do. So the first thing you do is you unleash the hardcore racists, all right? And
they're already ready. Yeah, they're ready to go.
You get that up and running. And that has happened as a consequence, perhaps. I mean, it was Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, of course, that Nigel Farage relied upon. Well, no, Andrew Tate that he relied upon for his information about the Southport killing. So you get the actual hardcore, full-on, what you might describe as the National Front legacy, but then you go to work on everybody else, and that's where the lies become really important, because you're telling people to be frightened. You're telling people that if there is some scumbag sex offender in a asylum processing centre in Epping, then you should be frightened of every single person in there.
Terrified, yeah.
And imagine if a politician had a nephew who was a sex offender. Would anybody argue that means we should be suspicious of everybody with the same name, or everybody from the same family, or everybody of the same ethnicity? It would be absolutely absurd. But if it's an asylum seeker, then politicians are prepared to go down that very ugly road, that very dark road. And that's where the Tinder kicks in. So people who were not anything close to National Front level attitudes are being successfully frightened and terrorised is the word that I'd use. And lies about eating pets and eating swans is a wonderful example of precisely that.
But your last caller nailed it, I think, and I hadn't thought of it until I was sitting waiting to talk to you and listening to him. And he said, Trump said, an awful thing, whatever it was, and Keir Starmer just was stood next to him, and he kind of smiled meekly and said, "Well, he's actually a friend of mine."
Well, that was what else could he have done?
Stamping on the Tinder before.
Do you want to punch him?
I'm not sure. No. That in that specific situation, absolutely, I don't know what he could have done.
Yeah.
But on a grander reductionist scale, it's like I think those people who are swayed, who are scared, haven't got the grown-up to turn around and look up to who says, no, this is wrong.
And then, you're right. And that's the kind of leadership that Starmer could be providing. And there are suggestions he's about to start trying, but it may be too little too late. And he is not, so far, a particularly inspiring figure. It's also why I am very interested in this slightly self-aggrandizing observation about how few people there are in the space that they keep telling us is absolutely full to bursting with anti-woke warriors and anti-racist activists. And, I suppose it's why they couldn't cope with Black Lives Matter, because for a moment there were actually quite a lot of people standing up against racism and kneeling down against racism, and their little tiny heads exploded.
They realise, we're not the majority, actually, we really aren't.
Yeah.
And it's the majority that are getting scared. It sounds so silly, but it's such a superficial, silly thing. It's consciousness. If you just say, this is all lies, this is all shit, I think that's what it is as well. There's no kid shouting that the emperor hasn't got any clothes on. Even when you do, it's getting drowned out, and I don't understand why. They've managed to make the fear drown that out, and we need something, hopefully Keir Starmer, because he's got the platform. Ed
Davey went there yesterday, actually, but again, where's the coverage? Where are the clips?
I've always liked Ed Davey, and I've always liked the Lib Dems, but for some reason, you always get that they don't. And I just don't know why people have that attitude about them.
Where does it end, I wonder? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because,
there's a lot of talk online about the Green Party, and it's like, is
any port in a storm?
Change? Are we witnessing an extinction? Yeah, but are we? Yeah, well, exactly. Are we witnessing an extinction of an actual whole system and a whole way of thinking? Is this their death throes?
I don't side with anybody when it comes to science.
You wouldn't side with the medical experts who say it's dangerous nonsense?
I wouldn't. When it comes to science, I don't side with anybody.
Right. You don't...
No, I don't side with anybody, because science is never settled, and we should remember that.
It says a very stupid person, so let's ignore him. But that very stupid person is poised, or certainly currently poised, to be in charge of our health service. Imagine having somebody in charge of the health service who doesn't really think that science is settled on most medical issues. Oh, you don't have to imagine it if you live in the United States of America, and you may not have to imagine it if you live here. But on this very specific question, the ludicrous claim that there's a link between paracetamol and autism, why is Farage frightened of the truth?
Nigel Farage loves to present himself as the man who tells it like it is. He wraps himself in the flag of plain speaking, acting as if he's the only one bold enough to voice what others supposedly won't dare to say. But peel back that image, and you don't find bravery. You find fabrication. Farage isn't some truth-teller breaking taboos. He's a serial liar whose rhetoric fits neatly into the same race-baiting script that Donald Trump perfected on the global stage. Think about Trump at the United Nations, spinning lurid tales about Europe being invaded, about London sinking into Sharia law, about migrants destroying Western civilization. None of it was true. Every single claim was manufactured to terrify, divide, and harden people against one another. And Farage? He dips his cup into that same poisoned well, serving up the same baseless hysteria dressed up as common sense. This is what makes O'Brien's words so powerful. When he calls Farage a liar and a racist, it isn't an insult designed to shock. It's an observation backed by years of evidence. Farage has spent his career whipping up fear around immigration, fueling myths about so-called no-go zones and waves of illegals, while always dodging the consequences of his own words. The pattern is unmistakable. Trump warns America it's collapsing under migration. Farage warns Britain it's on the brink unless the doors are slammed shut. Different stages, different audiences, but the same performance, the same undertones, and the same strategy. Weaponize misinformation, then act like you're the only one brave enough to say it. This isn't plain speaking, it's calculated fear-mongering, and James O'Brien is right to call it out for exactly what it is. At the heart of Farage's message is the same refrain that has echoed through every populist movement of the past decade. White Christian Europe and America are under siege, and they must be defended. Strip away the pint-glass chatter and the radio-friendly grin, and his script is indistinguishable from Trump's. Keep the foreigners out, blame the Muslims, pretend the West is crumbling. The tactic is gaslighting. Trump insists he isn't a white supremacist, even as he paints London's Muslim mayor Sadiq Khan as an existential threat. Farage insists he isn't racist, even as his infamous breaking point poster plastered Britain with the faces of desperate refugees. These aren't accidents. They're not coincidences. They are deliberate dog whistles turned into foghorns. And when the nightmare predictions collapse under reality, when London doesn't descend into chaos, when migrants contribute more than they take, the story simply shifts. The lies move to a new headline, a new talking point, all in the hope that enough people remain scared, angry, and misled. This is why O'Brien's bluntness matters. He isn't hurling insults. He's naming the strategy for what it is, a career built on resentment, division, and misdirection. Farage isn't the plain-speaking patriot he pretends to be. He's a man who weaponizes fear while dodging accountability for the damage it causes. And here's the bottom line. Sometimes the only honest response is the blunt one. Nigel Farage is a liar. Nigel Farage is a racist. And no amount of charm, chuckles, or flag-waving can disguise it. Until next time, this has been The Whip Line. Thanks for tuning in.